I have a challenge to all Christians who like to claim that Jesus' historicity is proven by extra biblical writings, such as those by Tacitus. Now, here's the challenge. If Tacitus writing about the fact that there were these people who believed in Jesus as the Christ, as the Jewish Messiah, then are you willing to accept the other writings of Tacitus? I know often I have made this statement, but I focused on the fact of what he said about Serapis and Vespasian healing people in the same way that Jesus did, based on the belief of the god Serapis. But in this challenge, this one is more concerning Moses and the story as far as the Bible records it. Because according to Tacitus, there was a plague that was going on in Egypt. During this plague, the Pharaoh Boschius, I can't say the name right, went to the oracles of Amun and asked what should he do. The oracles of Amun told him that he should take the people who were plagued, who had this disease, round them up, and then he herded them into the wilderness. After herding them into the wilderness, as they sat there in their sorrow, a man arose named Moses. Moses then told the people, let's not sit here waiting for God or man, but let's go and take the initiative ourselves. And these people took a 6-day journey, and on the 7th day, they entered the land of Canaan, expelled the people of Canaan, and then built their holy city. Now that is far, far, far different than the story that you received in your Bible. But y'all like to say that Tacitus is writing about Jesus, verifies Jesus. If you take the writings of Tacitus as verification of Jesus, historicity, then this is what he says about Moses. That Moses wasn't a prince of Egypt. That Moses didn't go into the wilderness first after committing murder, come back with his wife after he experienced God on the mountain. That Moses didn't come to the Jewish people and demonstrate his power of leprosy. But notice how there is a disease involved here. But that Moses didn't go to the Pharaoh and said, let my people go. He didn't do that. And then the Pharaoh was hard in the heart, and then all these plagues and things hit. 10 plagues hit Egypt. None of those plagues hit Egypt. Just say some other kind of sickness, bodily sickness. Then he talks about the fact that they just left and the Pharaoh herded them out. According to your story, there's the whole pillar of fire and the splitting of the Red Sea and the chariots being drowned, and then they getting into the holy, they making their 6-day journey, but then having to turn around and wander for 40 years before they can enter the promised land, and all these rock spouting water and manna from heaven and quail coming down by a trillion, all these different amazing stories in your Bible. That's not what Tacitus records. And y'all like y'all Tacitus. So I'm questioning, are you willing to accept Tacitus on this part? Or because of your confirmation bias, you're saying, you would say here that Tacitus is wrong. Well, what about someone else? In this version, Josephus, who is a Jewish man and has his own confirmation bias, is saying that Mantheo wrote a fanciful tale. And what did he write about? He said that there were these plague victims in Egypt, and that they followed a man whose name was Osarphus, otherwise known as, but he was called Moses. And he took these plague victims and he led them across the Sinai Peninsula into Judea and established the city of Jerusalem. And this was done at the time of Amenhotep II. So are you going to take Josephus's writings? Are you going to take Manetheo writings? Which one are you going to accept, Josephus or the guy who wrote before Josephus was ever alive? The guy who would be closer to the time frame. You see, these historians are writing based on the information to which they had at the time and what people believed at the time, the stories that people told at the time. And these stories told by Tacitus, told by Mantheo, told by other people, Diodorus, speaks of not this miraculous things of Moses, but speak of a people who were lepers. And then out of the lepers, they then made their way into Judea. And I can see how that story would be unappealing, because effectively you are saying that the Israelite people who become the Israelite people were once a whole people. And then, well, no, let me rephrase. That the Israelite people were people who were diseased. And through the body's natural process of generation of having babies while diseased, and then the babies start to develop antibodies towards that disease, that the Israelite people are a diseased people that then created their stories, manipulated their story from the disease version to something that is more appealing, and changed the stories up to have splitting seas and all these, and then created Abraham and created Noah and created all these other stories based on other stories that had already been out. That the true story of the Israelite people is that they were diseased people that were kicked out of Egypt purposely based on the oracle of a moon, and then established themselves in Canaan. And I can imagine that here comes these lepers, the Canaanite people who were in that area of the Levant, probably ran for their lives because at that time frame, they had leper colonies. They had places, and people didn't visit those leper colonies. They were afraid to deal with those lepers. So did Israelites really come from a diseased people of Egyptians? So Israelites are Egyptians who had diseases, according to Tacitus, according to Menetheo, according to Diodorus. That's where Israelites come from. Are you willing to accept that, Christians, since you accept everything else that those writers write? Answer. I would love to hear it. But always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.